I think the promise of agents will do everything is bullshit.
This is Danila Shtan, CTO of Nebius, one of the biggest AI cloud providers.
You can't imagine how hard it is to be one of the first to adopt new NVIDIA chips in production for a large customer. Working with an AI agent is not dissimilar to working with a junior engineer. People want Claude Code not because they want an agent to work for them. They want Claude Code because it's a hyped tool and everyone's talking about that.
Can people use agentic tooling within the hiring process?
No. Very task-oriented, very mechanical. This is a cohort of engineers that are at risk right now.
For the people that don't know, what does Nebius do?
Nebius is a cloud company, but because we've started pretty late in the game, so like just for the scale, 4 years ago there was no Nebius. 3.5 years ago there was an idea that we know what to build, and it turned out something completely different. The current shape of being the AI-oriented cloud, so mainly focused on GPUs, AI workloads, etc., then came up about like 2.5 years ago. So we were late to the game for the cloud stuff, and we had to find a niche. And ChatGPT was released, Llama was released, everything started moving to the direction that we see it now. And we decided, well, this might be something we can be successful at, and we built that. So we are the AI cloud, but mainly focused on AI-centric workloads, mainly enabled by GPUs, and having access to an enormous amount of GPUs is one of our main assets that we build upon.
It's interesting that you said you're kind of late to the game, and it could be my ignorance, but doing my research, I thought you were a little bit early. Like, who are people that were earlier in the space or companies?
I mean, the general cloud business.
Yeah.
Well, come on. AWS released their first service in what was it, like 2003?
But specifically AI cloud.
I think this is a little bit of an artificial niche, to be honest, right? Because while the demand for AI workloads is immense and it will only grow, but with the whole penetration of the market and growth, it will blur. And I think in 5 years, we won't be talking AI clouds. It's going to be clouds again, just clouds. But even for AI-specific workloads, there were a number of American companies that were way earlier than we were. Like CoreWeave is a nice example. Lambda Labs were pretty famous when we started. Crusoe is still somewhat relevant, etc. Most of these companies kind of phased out of cloud business and focused more on building large-scale facilities, etc. But we were definitely not the first.
Yeah. Who are some of your customers that people will recognize?
It's a hard question for me because I'm not sure which customers I'm supposed to, not supposed to disclose.
Okay.
But we are pretty proud about the ones that we can disclose there on our website. But I think we've had a chat with every major AI lab out there, for sure. Some of those are our customers. A lot of AI friendly enterprises, the companies that you don't really think about as this is an AI company, actually have a lot of AI going in the background, and they are also the customers. So I think there are some logos that everyone will recognize, for sure.
It feels like a very interesting space. Also niche right now, but maybe it's going to normalize later on. For the engineers that want to go into this field because they love infrastructure, they love AI, might be a good match. What do you typically look for in the capabilities that they bring to the table?
Well, there are several streams, right? So first there is the general infrastructure engineer track, right? So anyone who has knack for infrastructure, who understands the responsibility and the scale and distributed systems is always welcome to the team. So we just hire those people on spot. We don't require any prior AI experience. Being the cloud, and especially the cloud on the frontier of the hardware, you can't imagine how hard it is to be one of the first to adopt new NVIDIA chips in production for a large customer. This comes with the toil. So naturally, people who are deep into like systems programming, figuring out what's wrong with the drivers on the hardware level, etc., also in great demand. Low-level storage people, because again, AI workloads, it's not just about GPUs, right? It's about immense demand for performance throughout the stack, networking and storage included. Like we routinely have customers who, I don't know, download around like hundreds of gigabytes per second of data sets while training, like for their training runs. You need infrastructure and services to sustain that. So that comes in handy. And with the recent developments, like now newly found focus on inference, also everyone who knows how to write kernels, program GPUs at a low level is also like in high demand. And those, I think, are one of the most well-paid and in high demand people in the market nowadays, because we definitely see the shift from training to inference, as in running models. And in order to make inference really like well-behaving and performant and everything, you need to change a lot at the lowest level of how those models are run on GPUs. And like, I think there are several hundreds of people in the top cohort out there in the world. Yeah, not more.
Can you walk me through your hiring process? So if someone is excited about this, wants to apply to Nebius, do you have the same hiring process depending on teams, or how do you typically have that?
It depends on the person, the background, and what we are talking about. But in general, our hiring process is more or less standard for everyone, for all like venues. It might have like specialized interviews for like if we're talking about some deep expertise, but in general, like we have a lot of coding sessions, we have algorithmic sessions for everyone. Always, we tend to have systems design, for example, but again, it's optional because, for example, for a low-level GPU programmer that has like spent years writing like C code, probably systems design for distributed systems is not the best way to assess them, right? But in general, we have some specialized sections. Then after those interviews, if it's not a very unique like case for the expertise, like someone who's been building networking stacks for the past 10 years, probably will lean towards like the relative, like to the relevant team, right? But if it's not, we usually don't choose teams at the very beginning. Like we make sure the interviews are passed. We like extend an offer, but it's an offer to join the company, not the particular team. And then we get into this, like, we call this process Bootcamp, endeavor to find a proper team for the person, to find a match. Because I strongly believe, like, while hard skills and expertise matters, soft skills and, in general, compatibility with the people around you matters way more for productivity, for, like, work-life balance, if you will, right? So usually people have several teams they are supposed to join in the first 3 months. So they spend like 3 to 4 weeks per team. And in general, they are like just brought up, like onboarded, and are included in day-to-days, like your daily meetings, talking to product managers, project managers around, like going through daily stand-ups, for example. So the person like goes through this process for 3 weeks, changes teams several times, and at the end have kind of an exit interview. So we like reflect on what has happened during these 3 months, how was the onboarding structured. That's my personal issue. I'm always talking like, and by the way, these interviews are always conducted by me personally. So, and that's like what I pay attention a lot into how efficient was the onboarding, like how much did the person spend in vain, etc. So this is like internal metrics of sorts. Yeah, the onboarding should be fast. Like you need to be productive. Day 1, day 2. If it's a week, it's like the person who spent 3 weeks on your team.
Yeah, something's wrong.
Like we ask the person which team would they like to join. and we ask the team leads if they would like this person to join their team. And if there is a match, so be it.
Has there ever not been a match? And what happens then?
It depends on how the bootcamp went on in general. If there is like a serious mismatch, for example, a person thinks that the match is with the team that is like gave a definitely negative feedback, we would treat it as probation period failed sometimes.
Wow.
If it's less than that, like there is some hesitation, etc., we usually discuss it very openly that the feedback was like that. There's definitely a mismatch. There is like second team in your preference. Would you consider that? We do understand that this is not the perfect situation, etc., etc., etc. But in general, that's rare case. So we are usually talking about exceptions rather than a rule. People generally tend to find the team they're comfortable with.
Yeah. Let's break it down for hiring. Algorithms, system design. Can people use agentic tooling within the hiring process? No. Why is that?
The honest answer is that we don't understand how to treat that and how to work through that process. On the contrary, we actually like when pandemic started, COVID, etc., everyone went remote, all the interviews went remote. And we are actually now started like the backwards process. And we are bringing people sometimes like from another country, paying for their plane tickets and all, bringing them back on site to conduct on-site interviews.
Face to face.
Remember 5 years ago, that was a thing.
Yeah, I had that.
Yeah, I think everyone had that, right? But now, like especially for select people who we see more senior and more interested in like getting to know, we actually bring them into the office to conduct an on-site interview. And the whole agentic during the interviews, it's a mess because for our process, that would mean that we've gone through a lot of investment and maybe we don't get the person that we really interviewed. Like because like algorithms and coding is, there is an argument that algorithmic sessions are bullshit. Like no one writes that code for their production use cases. And that's true in a sense. But this is a very good baseline to understand whether the person's computer science like background or like knowledge in general is up to a certain standard or not. And we think this is quite a strong signal of what will the quality of the work of the person be in the future, if they can write like a simple algorithm or not, like a purely algorithmic task. So adding noise to that with this model interview cheating tools are crazy, right? Like
they're really good.
Know nothing. Like you can't even by looking at the person determine if they are like having assistance or not. And like I think that's a problem, and I really don't like it. So we are designing a special agent coding session when like we would assess how a person interacts with an agent. What are they doing? How are they steering the loop? Like what's the task? How do they decompose that? How do they think if that works or not? But it's not on the menu just now. But AI-assisted interviews are a mess. Don't like it at all.
Gotcha. Then zooming in on the bootcamp, I love this idea of just hiring people that are really, really good, right? If they're not very, very specialized, because for those specialized people, you probably have specialized teams. That is just a match. But for the people that can kind of go anywhere and can go in and out of teams, I feel like very senior people are very capable of going into a team, solving problems, and sometimes overarching teams and solving problems across teams. So I like that this is part of your onboarding, part of a matchmaking.
Yeah, and it's not just for very senior people, because people who are less experienced, I feel like they actually get more value out of the process, because they don't really know what they want to do and they don't really know what will the fit be. Oh, sorry.
No worries.
And like being able to look at different teams, being able to get more context of what's going on in the company in general is a very good thing for them. Because more senior people, they're just like, okay, I'll figure it out. And they usually do. Less senior people, they require some guidance there. right? And this process is essentially designed because like all the teams work in collaboration in general, right? So for example, there is like, it's not a rare case when a person is designing some kind of a feature in one team, changes team within the bootcamp. The next team, they're actually on the team that is like a client of that feature. So they immediately see the value, they can reflect on what was done, how the interaction was structured, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They pass the team, like, okay, next team has nothing to do with it. And their fourth team, like, for example, they are actually on the dependency side of the first feature, right? And all the struggles that they had while implementing, they can see why did that happen, and they can think of how can that be amended or fixed, et cetera, et cetera. So in general, understanding more about the team's internal stuff, being more transparent to each other, it helps. And I think it sets the right tone from the very beginning. We're a very open team. We're very transparent about what's going on. We talk about our problems, and we show our problems during the bootcamp. Like a person can see the whole cycle.
Do you then specifically look at teams that have availability, or
No.
do you just hire really good engineers all the time?
Yeah. We never stop hiring. We're always pushing our talent acquisition team to bring more people around. And our interview is somewhat like rigorous and might seem like an overkill.
Sounds tough.
Yeah. We don't hire a lot, right? I think it's usually like 10 to 15 engineers a month. It's rarely more. I would like to have more, but we don't. And then we don't I spent like probably half a year fighting at an earlier stage of the company, fighting with my team leads and people who report to me, forbidding them to use the word headcount. Like there is no headcount in our company. We don't talk headcounts. We talk demands, we talk tasks, we talk priorities, we talk size of the backlog. We don't talk headcount. So we don't have the concept of the headcount. So everyone can hire if they see like it's something they need. We have like a little internal system that would balance like the amount of bootcampers, for example, the team gets. But they have a choice. They have a say of who comes, like, so they can preview the CVs, the interview results, see if that would be a potential match, and only like ask or get in line for very particular people. And so we just hire, and it's always like, but what if we hire like 10 people and don't need 10 people? Like, the answer is usually, let's see when we get there. If there is an issue, and I see there is an issue, or someone sees there, we'll have a chat and we'll figure it out. So far, we didn't have an issue.
Nice. Yeah. You and I spoke before the show, and you mentioned your engineering population is about 300 people.
It's closing 400 now.
Closing 400. Yeah. That's only in Amsterdam based?
No. Majority is in Amsterdam. Well, in the Netherlands. But Netherlands is not like a large country, so everyone can come to an Amsterdam office once in a while. Majority is in Amsterdam. We have like a healthy presence in London, and we're actually focusing on London a lot these days. We have, I think, 10-ish% spread remotely around Europe, everywhere, like from Portugal to Baltic countries, from Finland to Italy. Right. We have some presence in Israel. We have some presence in the US. Yeah, that's it.
But you've spoken to kind of all of the hires when they come on from a bootcamp perspective?
Bootcamp, yes. I've spoken to all of the hires, especially in the early stage of the company. Right now, people who go directly to teams like highly specialized, I usually don't have like a proper interaction. And we've recently been on an M&A spree, so I've definitely not had a chance to talk to everyone who joined with the acquired companies.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like it's fascinating to have this kind of onboarding process where people join multiple teams and then gain perspectives. It sounds like a lot of fun, like coming into a company like that.
And like, I actually think everyone wins. It's a clear win-win situation. Like, it's not a win-win for everyone, because sometimes people tend to be tired, or it's like, well, it's a burden, right? To change context every 3 weeks, especially if you like feel like it's a challenge to get on board, etc. And there is that aspect. But in general, I think it's a win-win. Like it's a win for an employee who gets to see what's going on around, which is extremely important. It's a win for employee that can actually match the people who they actually vibe with, because it's very hard to understand whether that's going to be like a good match during final interviews or like just reading about the team. You actually need to see the people.
Of course,
you need to see how they talk. What's the mood around the office? What are the memes that they post into internal memes channel? Because like I'm telling you from experience, not everyone is compatible with the same memes. Like
of course,
definitely,
it's very
different,
tasteful.
Yeah, and like what's the attitude from the peers, from product managers? Is like, do we like it or not? And that's a big deal. And for the company, first it's like relaxed and happy employees is always good, like productive, and teams become very productive because like they actually find people who click together very well. It's a good thing for the company because, for example, team leads see this constant influx of people. They see new people, so they are more relaxed about like talking about performance, for example, right? There is no commotion of, oh, this person is like not really well, like not a good fit for my team or underperforming, but I will just hold on to them because if I get rid of them, who's going to work?
I lose my headcount.
Yeah, I lose my headcount. Sorry. Yeah, so like, and team leads are usually like way more relaxed because they see the constant influx of people. Like we are constantly hiring, people are constantly cruising the bootcamp. Like they're like what's 40 to 50 people, like maybe 20 to 30 people, always like in the loop. Everyone sees that they're there, etc. So in general, I think this works really well for us.
Gotcha.
It becomes a burden for me personally sometimes because like there are days when I have like 3 or 4 like this bootcamp and meetings, but I still maintain it.
Yeah, very interesting that from a title perspective, and this was also me a few years back, I've spoken to more and more CTOs now, but this seems like I would expect CTOs to be very much technology focused. And I feel like you put a lot of pride in kind of team dynamics, engineering culture across the board, also in your involvement in these bootcamp sessions.
I'm not sure CTO is a technical role, at least at some scale. Well, it might be for the smaller scale when you are a startup that like everyone is doing everything, and CTO is just a guy who loves tech more than everything else. But in a sense, after a certain scale, it's a management position. It's less about tech. It's more about building the team, making sure delivery is there, making sure there is no conflict between engineering and product function, engineering and business function, which, trust me, there always is stuff to quarrel about and to argue about. It's more about like structuring the hiring and onboarding process, etc. Of course, you need to be a techie. You need to like be able to assess what's going on. You need to be able to dive into projects. You need to be able to like dive deep if needed. But it's not your day-to-day. It's not. It's more about management. It's management in the technical organization. And I think the larger the scale is, the less tech there is.
What are some of the skills or capabilities that makes a CTO successful?
Good people person, good manager, like people manager. Being flexible enough. Like I usually describe the role as you need to be an advocate for the engineering team in front of business function, for example. And at the same time, you need to be the advocate for the business function in front of your engineers. Like you need to bring like sanity checks to both sides of the table. And you need to be like this, I don't know, constantly in the middle person who reflects on both sides of the equation and make sure that everything is balanced. I think, well, it's less about the CTO role, but I think it's more about any manager in the modern company, one of the main skills is you should always be managing expectations of people around you. Like I think this is the main thing a modern manager is doing, and every failure I've seen usually comes from not managing expectations right. Even if you are not capable of delivering, if you're not capable of doing something properly, if you manage the expectations right, the result will be way better than if you just close out and like struggle on your own and don't tell everyone like you have problems, etc., etc., etc. So being in the middle, being able to talk to everyone, accept their point of view, internalize that, and manage expectations.
Why do people fail sometimes to manage expectations? Because it seems so simple when you lay it out like that.
Because people are people. Pride, fear of seeming incompetent, like
ego.
Pride, ego. Yeah, like I can't do that. I should be able to do it, or I promised. Like in general, fear of communication, of open communication. What will they think about me if I tell them I don't deliver? Imposter syndrome, of course. Here we are. But in general, like it's hard to admit failure. And, in a sense, it shouldn't. Like, nothing's going to happen. Like, if you're open about your achievements and failures, people will actually, I think they appreciate it more. Because no one likes people who are bragging about their achievements, right? And, like, discounting their failures. No one likes people who, like, bring their failures as a surprise. Because like it's not about just managing expectations. You need to remember that everything that you've said out loud, someone heard, internalized, and probably have plans based on what you've said or committed to. And there is a lot of stuff in motion that you are not aware about that might have like a long chain of failures if you fail to deliver or fail to manage expectations of people around you. And you can't formalize that. You can't say like, I didn't write an okay in that particular ticket, hence you shouldn't have acted upon that as I did. Like if you had a conversation and you've said it out loud, you're gonna do it. It doesn't matter whether you said probably, it doesn't matter if you've said I'm uncertain. It doesn't even matter if you've directly outright said, I will do it, but don't count on it. Because the second part, no one will remember. They will only remember the I will do it part. So you need to be very cautious about you. And it's not cautious as in don't commit to anything and don't talk about anything. Talk. It's a good thing to give people indications, etc. Just don't forget what you've said to them and go and like adjust the expectations, etc.
Gotcha. Yeah. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about agentic engineering. Some of the
that's some shift.
Yeah. I feel like some of the bigger organizations are really questioning their engineering capabilities, distributing tools, trying to figure out how to make their engineering work more effective, because that's the promise. How do you view agentic engineering currently?
Oh, it's a constant source of like internal arguments, especially with our CEO, who's like very bullish on it.
Hype.
Yeah. Why isn't like 90% of our code written by AI? Like, yeah, because AI won't wake at 3 a.m. Like when there is an incident in production. Like, okay, might have come out the wrong foot. In general, I think it's very weird to say that it's not happening. It is, like 100%. You can definitely see it. I think the inflection point was roughly this winter when, what was it? I think Anthropic's 4.6 and GPT's 5.4 models were released, which like really raised the bar. And with more than like 4.7, 4.8, GPT 5.5, these are extremely capable models. And with the right agentic loop harness and with the right tools, it's like it is capable of serious engineering work. I think the promise of agents will do everything is bullshit. Like, not at this level, not right now, not in the near future. Everyone who talks about the software factories, like it's like a new term that bothers me immensely.
Dark factory.
Yeah, agent will look at your production, fix the bug, write tests everything, and like, yeah, everyone who had an experience on driving a self-evolving agent loop in software engineering knows that it doesn't work like that. It never does. So I think we are way far from like completely autonomous work. And of course, there might be examples of people achieving that, like, but it's like up to a certain scale, up to a certain like business scale, for example, etc. And I think the most successful examples I usually have like a human driving the whole thing, right? So I think AI agents and like agentic software engineering is here to stay for sure. I just don't think that the hype that we see out there is true. It's not that. It's a tool. It's just another tool. Like there was a hype about like I don't know what was it. What was like I don't know. At some point, for example, if you remember, in the C# community, there was like a huge hype about the ReSharper when JetBrains released their tool, and it was like, yeah, this is gonna change everything forever. We're gonna be so much more productive. Sure, it's just a tool now. Like of course, no one writes in the Notepad++ anymore, right? Yeah, that is true. But I think we're gonna like all the systems will mature and it will just become a commodity, just a tool. But in general, I think like agentic coding is a very powerful tool. Like when people say that like multiplication of like your performance or your productivity, that might be true. But also, I think the baseline, the zero in your skill that is going to be multiplied, it's not the like you're not an engineer. It's way higher than it's like somewhere along your mid-level to senior engineer. And we all know what happens if you multiply a negative number, right? So zero is up there. Everything lower is negative.
Catastrophic.
Yeah, and it's going to be multiplied. So like that's where we see like I've created a startup with Claude Code in the matter of like 1 hour. Oh, and like actually like it gets like whatever subscriptions. Like oh, everything is wiped by a hacker. Why did that happen? Well, it happened because there was no sane engineer present in this loop. And in general, models are not that good yet at like doing large context, having intrinsic knowledge. They don't. Like everything you see in the loop is like the model that like it can't invent anything. No like pre-training loop and the general knowledge in the model will let it actually solve your task. So everything it reads right there in the repository or what you prompt it, etc. And if you don't, it will not think about that. It will just implement it as is and tell you everything is working fine. And it will be working fine. And like that's one of the parts that bother me about the software factories. Like people who write articles about, I just recently read one, they managed to claim in the same sentence essentially that autonomous software engineering is a great area because it's formally verified. You either pass the tests or not, right? And the same sentence they say, and the models are very capable of writing the tests. So if your model writes the implementation and writes the test and everything is green, how sure are you that it's actually done a good job? For now, there are like theories that it can be addressed by a separate model loop, right? Writing text and specs. But again, they converge very fast. Like they literally read everything that is in the repository, the documentation, etc., as the ground truth, because they need ground truth to start working. And without like external challenge, without external questions, etc., you won't get anywhere.
It's just self-contained information.
Yeah,
isolated.
And it like boils down to like very inefficient loops. Like that's why I think, like from my personal experience, like working with an AI agent, doing stuff, and I actually do a lot of stuff these days. Like I think for the likes of me, this whole AI agentic revolution is like it's great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because like I can drop my ideas into code immediately, have prototypes instead of like gathering sessions with developers trying to work through the issues, planning, etc., 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 and then just present the MVP and say like, here, it works. Let's do a product out of this. But working with an AI agent is not dissimilar to working with a junior engineer. They don't have the full context. They sometimes have weird ideas, and they like manage to like talk themselves into like exploring these ideas and building on top of that. They require constant challenge from the outside, like showing the outside perspective. Like they require, like working with that requires like a decent internal bullshitter meter, right? When you read the statement from a model and you're like, wait a second, this shouldn't be there. This is not how it's supposed to work. Like asking questions that would imply verification from something that is currently not in the context, remembering what might be in the context of the model. Same as it, like what was the way of thinking of this developer that reached out this conclusion, right? So this is very similar. And I think this whole, like, actually, it's not the software engineers enabler, it's the software engineering managers enable way more than like, and even if you see engineers who are actually good and like increase their productivity with AI agents a lot, I think it's because these individuals would be a very good engineering managers.
Interesting.
In a sense.
Yeah. Do people in the organization have access to agentic tooling? Like, have you widely distributed that? Have you only given it to senior engineers?
We have access, not to everything. For example, we have access to OpenAI models and codecs, for example, and everyone can build their own harness with GPT. We don't give widespread access to Claude Code. And for me, the distinction is exactly the hype. Like people want Claude Code not because they want an agent to work for them, or not because they know what to do with it. They want Claude Code because it's a hyped tool and everyone's talking about that. And this for me is an issue. We need more guardrails. We need more observability there. In a sense, like I think I've recently posted it on internal Slack, like a manifesto of like, when will we get Claude Code? Like, I think we need to reach a state in our tooling when for every pull request that is supposed to be merged into a production branch, you need to have a clear distinction whether this was written by a human or assisted by an agent. And if it was assisted by an agent, you need to have a full trajectory, so the full session or sessions that led to this result. Connected, open for audit, etc., etc., etc. Because we are shifting in a way from like actually writing the code and understanding like if humans have written the code, you can hope to have a conversation with them about it. If the agent have written the code, you cannot have an honest conversation with a human. Oh, in the extreme cases when like you should not commit the code that you don't understand, which you can say, but no one will do it anyway, right? But it means you need to shift from like discussing code to discussing the way of thinking about the code. Like, what did you think when you were like designing this approach, right? What was the reference architecture that you had in mind? How did you drive the model? Did you challenge it enough, or did you just YOLO it with one prompt, etc., etc.? And this becomes an important question. So I would be very hesitant, and I am very hesitant and very conservative in this, to like allow the widespread adoption of an overly hyped tooling if I don't have enough guardrails. And I don't have enough guardrails as of now, and we are building it internally right now, but we're not there yet. At the same time, like I think the most capable software engineering model as of today is OpenAI's one. They constantly change a little bit, like with the new releases going back and forth. And everyone who actually wants to build with an agent can do that right now. And like they do. It's not just less hype, more practical work.
Interesting. I feel like some of the specification frameworks are trying to solve the challenge that you mentioned. When there is a code change, what is the context that went into that? But it's not addressing kind of the whole history of the conversation and how that specification came to be. I feel like we need more insights in intent and history on how a change came to be.
Yeah, in a sense, like it circles back, to be honest, to one of the interviews we have. Like for engineers that are higher than our basic grade. Now, basic grade is not junior people, it's higher than that. But if we consider a person to be more senior than that, one of the interviews we conduct is technical due diligence. It's not structured in any way, but it's a free-form chat about a recent project that you've been involved in. And we don't assess architecture, for example, or the result of whatever happened. Like we have separate interviews for that. What we assess is general understanding of what was going on during the project. How were the requirements gathered? Why did you choose this way? Not in architecture way, but like who was the decision maker? How was this decision adopted, right? Why were you building it at all? What was the purpose of the product? What do you know about clients, like our users? How did they adopt? Like, did you get any feedback from that? How was it internalized within the team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And this is the interview that we conduct for every engineer, essentially, who is like higher than our baseline. Because this is I think this is one of the more important qualities nowadays. And it loops nicely into agentic workloads, right? The person who actually tries to think out of the box outside of this particular task, thinking about the system in general, decision-making process in general, like what's going to happen with the product in general after it's released, after it's being used, tend to be like a better engineer, a more productive engineer, brings more value to the company. In a sense, this is like, remember there was like the whole DevOps commotion, right? Developers, operations, now everyone's bringing together, let's do. The idea was that you don't need to just write code, you need to think about the system as a whole. I think we are currently in the next step with this whole agentic revolution. You need to think about not just the system as a whole, but product as a whole. Implementation details, architecture, operations, how it's run, like whether it breaks or not, who's on duty today, etc. And then the product thinking, right? Why are we even doing this? Do we need to challenge the product team that brought this new feature? Why, like, how will that loop into the rest of the product or the system, etc.? I think we are like, remember, like T-shaped people, etc. We are going to the round-shaped people. Like you need to be a little bit of everything. You need to be, but in a sense, you just need to be a generally smart and sensible person, and that's it.
Yeah, I feel like it's easy to say, and for me, I always had kind of innate curiosity, so I'm just interested about what am I building, but also for whom and what problem am I solving and why, and if that doesn't make sense, then I shouldn't do it, but I should focus on something else. Like it was always there, rather than focusing on how I build things. I think that's where it started. From me growing into junior engineer, it was very much, problem, how do I do this now? And when I got more comfortable, it was, well, should I do it in the first place? Because I now know how to do it. Like that's not interesting anymore. And I feel like I quite quickly pivoted to a point where I could definitely do with more depth in terms of hard skills, but I just feel like my curiosity drove me towards the more overarching thought. In your perspective, from your advice, engineers nowadays, do they focus more on kind of the what, why, and how, or more on their hard skills? Because I feel like hard skills are partially being automated in terms of generation.
Yeah, it will become obsolete in a sense. I recently had like a chat with a number of students, and they were like, "But okay, we are in the university right now, like finishing our computer science degrees, etc. How do we get into that? Like, what is our career path nowadays? Previously, it was obvious.
Yeah.
You go to intern position, junior position, you sit alongside the grandmasters, and you learn how to do stuff, and you acquire these hard skills, etc., etc., etc. But now with agents doing the junior work anyway, like what is the place for junior engineers anymore? And I think this is a misconception in a sense, because like people who have a knack for that, like smart people, curious people, like people that can who are good at decomposition, right? Like figuring out what are the parts that combine as a whole. They're good with agents, and they will still find a place, and they will be great. And it's like, yes, of course, you need more experience, and you need like this baggage, right, while you're growing. But it's important to acquire, but it's not about hard skills anymore. No one cares about the framework. No one cares about a particular library. No one cares if you know all the instruction of an x86 processor. It's a good thing to have because it like implies you have some knowledge and some baggage, but it's not a requirement anymore. It's not how you measure people anymore. And I think like we will still have people who are digging deep and who are bringing the frontier. It's just not a requirement. It's a specialization. It's not a requirement anymore. But thinking about what's going on, how to structure everything, being able to produce a concise flow of thought, which is an extremely hard thing if you think about it, right? People are not generally good at that.
Yeah.
This is what becomes of value. And yes, this will change how we view engineers, and this will probably change the composition of these teams. And some people who have a great career will phase out, right? Because previously you could go. I don't want to sound derogatory, but there is a special cohort of engineers that I think will vanish. For example, people who sit in banks and automate internal processes in Java. This banking Java developers.
Yeah.
This is something this is a cohort of engineers that are at risk right now, because they're very task oriented, very mechanical. These are the organizations that we are not even talking about this whole common sense, let's build a product thinking organization. They're not even thinking about operations, because there are separate operations teams.
Yeah.
This kind of engineers will become obsolete in 3 to 5 years. I feel. So there will still be inertia, but there will be no new influx of new people into those teams.
Yeah.
There will be no influx of people who will be able to think of that as a career path.
What happens to the systems they are responsible for? If no new influx of people come up,
agents will support
they
that.
will modernize it.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, I think people are definitely worse than even more than agents of figuring out of what's going on in a complex code base. Way worse. It's just not how we are built. So the only thing that is there is this, intrinsic knowledge, something that's not written anywhere, that's only exists in someone's head.
Yeah.
But it's not about the cohort of engineers. It's about particular people and particular skill set and particular environment and particular engineering manager who was okay with a bus factor of 1 and never pushed for knowledge exchange, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's less of an engineering problem, more of an organizational problem.
Yeah.
And for sure, having a job security by not writing documentation has been around for 40 years now, at the very least, right? And this will still be a thing, yeah, for sure. But we're not talking about that. About talking about engineering.
Yeah, maybe it's because I see myself still as a little bit young or eager, but I don't know how people get into a position like that, where they are just ingrained in a small cog in a big organization like a bank or insurance, very small moving or slow moving behemoths.
It's stable.
That might be it.
Yeah, it's stable. It provides decent benefits, way better work-life balance than working for a company like ours, for example. Like, we run a full responsibility cycle. You build it, you own it. Like, you have freedom to design stuff at will. You don't have like architectural committees
no
or
boards.
anything, no, like nothing like that. No architects as a separate position, right? You're an engineering team, figure it out. But you build it, you run it. You run it, you're responsible for it. You're responsible for it, you're on call for it. Even if it's like Christmas night, 3 a.m., it doesn't matter. Someone from the team is on call and is supposed to react if something fails. Good work-life balance? Probably not. Enough people who are willing to engage in this kind of situation, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. What if the agents write the code? That kind of whole, you build it, you own it, you run it, you're responsible. I feel like the lines blur.
That's why we are not there yet, and I don't think we should be.
Gotcha.
Like, again, I think at this day and age, committing production code into in a product that runs, I don't know, multiple hundred millions of yearly revenue should be owned by a human. It's non-negotiable. We are not there yet in terms of agent or AI capability. You can't rely on it. It's just it's a meme by now. ChatGPT and telling you, "Oh, you are totally right. I made a mistake." Yeah, I've seen it too many times.
Absolutely.
Right. So we're still human driven and human responsible. You can augment humans. You can help, increase their performance or automate some of the processes. For example, we have a lot of agentic workloads internally. It's just not about software development, right? For example, if there is an incident production, agents are actually pretty capable and good at finding the current root cause or coming up with an immediate mitigation plan, simply because they are faster. And this is more or less structured environment, right? You have a documentation, you have your metrics, you have the logs, you have Kubernetes that you can explore. And a human can do that, but it will take them 20 minutes.
Yeah.
An agent can do that in 3. This is a good thing, right? Or when we are talking about cross-checking, cross-referencing stuff, it's also something that the agent can do great nowadays. For example, when you're writing a postmortem, producing a postmortem by an agent, in my experience, is a shit show. It doesn't work. But checking and cross-referencing and grounding the facts is something the agent can do very well. We have agents right now who can look at the document, go to Slack monitoring, Kubernetes, and fact check every statement in the document, whether it's grounded, where it's was it like that? Correct if it's not. Provide feedback on and for root cause analysis, for example. This is a great thing because people can not notice something or they can skip something. The agent won't, because they don't have a modicum of trying to conserve the energy.
There's no ego there.
Yeah, it's less about ego. Human brain is optimized to conserve energy. They tend to not do stuff diligently. It requires a lot of willpower to do stuff diligently. And of course, there is a slip here and there. It always will be. It's just part of human nature. So this is where you can get the slope of grounding and making sure that everything works, etc. So again, augmenting people, not getting rid of people.
Gotcha. One of my last thoughts was, I think, a combination of what we discussed so far, because we mentioned from a focus standpoint, if you're new to the field or already kind of a little bit more early in career, things are being automated in terms of capabilities. So focusing on hard skills versus some of the other skills that you also need. might be better to focus on the other skills, more of the soft skills, more on the why and the product thinking. But you very specifically mentioned that algorithms are still part of your hiring flow. Like if I would want to join Nebius right now, I would fail specifically probably for those algorithms. It's something that I would have to train, and I would probably not really like it, enjoying it, kind of memorizing the algorithms. And I do think it might be good practice, but I wonder why that is still a thing. And when are we going to get rid of algorithms within an interview process?
I don't know. My answer is, like, for us specifically, is when we find another way to provide a good baseline. So algorithms, being able to, it's not about memorizing, to be honest. It's about, like, yes, it is about some patterns that you need to know and approach, but it's rarely, like, the tasks there are rarely about, like, remembering a particular algorithm and implementing that, right? It's more about thinking algorithmically, knowing when you can cut corners and when you can't, knowing about, like, a broader subset of lower level primitives, etc. And for us, it's separating, like, people who are into tech from people who are actual engineers. I'm sorry to frame it like that, right? Because we are still, like circling back, like, you need to have this internal, like, understanding of what can go wrong, and you can either have that with experience or with education, right? And I still think that for a lot of computer systems, this is an important part, right? You need to be able to think about that data structures, for example. Agents won't be able to solve it for some time, at the very least. The whole optimization cycle, like, you know what the modern optimization cycle with agents is? Just go run hundreds of theories, and maybe one of it will, like, genetic algorithm, if you will.
Yeah.
It's not the best approach, to be honest. It's prone to, like, finding local maximum and never exploring further. It's this approach is not what made all the greatest inventions in human history, right? No one have invented anything new just by digging and trying multiple times around the same area. So again, like, circling back to algorithms, it's still just a signal of whether the person actually has, like, some, well, computer science education. Oh, education is, I use the word education as an umbrella term, right? It's not about the university or a particular course. It's whether you have this understanding, erudition, if you want, about how do the computers actually work? How does the software actually work? Because this is important, because not all software is just, like, taking JSON from this API and sending it to another API. It's like there is a part of the market, and a huge one, which is exactly that. We are in a slightly different game. We build the infrastructure for those who do that. And hence we think it's still important for us to have a certain level of people who are into certain things.
Dan, thanks so much for coming on and sharing.
Sure.
This was great.
Thank you.